Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're ready to go, and I've been given the all clear by the Secretariat. So I suppose that means we should begin. It's fantastic to welcome you all. I'm so pleased that we've oversubscribed this session. We had such a successful last one. So let me just introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm Douglas Gautier. I'm the chairman of AAPPAC and been very honoured to be so since 2013. And I'm also the CEO and artistic director of the Adelaide Festival Centre. So this is the second of our sessions, and I want to thank Rochelle and Jack from the Secretariat for putting these together. There's clearly a great deal of interest, which is so encouraging, I think, in these difficult times, because I think all of us want to reach out and compare notes and hear from our colleagues as to how we're all dealing with these circumstances. So I hope you'll enjoy this session, and I'll now hand it over to the CEO of the Esplanade in Singapore, Yvonne Tham, who's also an executive committee member of AAPPAC. Yvonne.
All right, thank you so much, Douglas. Good morning to everybody. I hope, wherever you are, maybe it's not even morning. I think, that you're having a good day and you've had your cup of coffee. The topic was agreed perhaps 3 weeks or maybe a month ago, and we were looking at the arts, the role of the arts institution, be it a cultural center or an art center, performing arts center, or theater, in a time of social and economic recovery. If there's nothing about this virus, it just makes a fool of us. A month ago we were thinking of recovery. A month later, the word recovery just seems, what were we thinking about? A couple of days ago when we did a catch up with some of the panel members, Adelaide, the rest of Australia, probably it's in a slightly more tense situation than Adelaide. But even so, I think this morning, Douglas was just sharing there's a cluster that has emerged in a school. Philippines, Chris, who's on this panel, shared that it's been, has not come out of a quarantine. So it's the longest quarantine and closure the city has experienced in a long, long time. So, if there's nothing else, I think in some ways the topic of today is not so much the role of arts centers and cultural institutions in a time of social and economic recovery, but rather resilience, because this feels like something that will go on a little bit longer. And therefore, what is it that many of us are publicly funded, some of us are privately funded, and I'm very sure on this panel, or rather in listening in today, are also many independent presenters and promoters whose lives and businesses have been very, very much affected. And as kind of arts workers, maybe I use a more generic term, as arts workers, our job is always to try to navigate relationships, right? We're trying to put artists together with audiences, artists together with funders, audiences together with, new ways of encountering the arts, donors together with art centers. We're always trying to forge relationships. And in a time like this, of when relationships are being tested, today's panel, we will have speakers who share from the perspective of being bosses, chiefs, whatever, leaders of art centers. How do they navigate those relationships? How do they continue to serve their constituents? And how do they go to certain constituents and say, we need your support? At the same time, art centers are often seen as a part of the life of a city. We have Adelaide and Aichi here, and of course, Manila as well on this panel. And in a time when the city feels like it's in lockdown, how does an art center continue to provide a role? I think our presenters today, and that includes Dongjin from South Korea, are going to share these perspectives from folks who are running art centers, and then Dongjin will share a perspective from artists themselves. And then perhaps in our discussion, there is one other relationship that we haven't talked that much about, and that's the relationship with the rest of the world. While now we are all kind of locked down in our own little cities or countries or prefectures, The reality is that the arts have always been a way for human beings to say we are part and we are members of a larger community. So perhaps during the discussion, while we may not address this during the panel presentations, we could expand the discussion a little later to think about how do we continue to navigate these relationships across borders when borders are shut. So without further ado, I will move on to our first panelist. Each panelist have about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll have a period of discussion or Q&A, and please scribble down your questions as the presentations are being made. Our first presentation will come from Douglas. I think Douglas needs almost no introduction. He chairs, AAPPAC. He is the chief executive and also the artistic director of the Adelaide Festival Centre. In the midst of COVID, he opened a new theatre. So I think, when he shared that with me, I was like, oh my goodness, how on earth do you do that? So I believe, there's a lot to kind of learn from the city of Adelaide, how they've managed to be resilient during this period. So over to you, Douglas.
Thank you, Yvonne, and thanks for the opportunity again just to talk through this. Clearly, I will refer to specifics about our situation, and hope that has some broader ramifications that may be of interest. I agree with Yvonne very strongly, and I guess we all do. At one stage, we were really thinking post-COVID, but we're right back in it. We're luckier than some, most definitely, and we're just trying to work our way through it. I suppose what I'm going to touch on today is really the dichotomy between our responsibilities to our organisation and making sure that it is resilient, comes through the current situation, but also our responsibilities to the broader community in every aspect where we have made contributions in the past and where we can in the future. So could I have the first slide, please? Okay, so look, you don't need to worry about the numbers too much, but simply to say that this sets up our social and economic contribution in the past, and we do feel that the organisation is respected and the contribution is respected. But how do we continue to manifest that and contribute through this period? So there's a very specific sort of narrative we've got to have to the people that are funding us and to the people who are supporting us and to our stakeholders. Next slide, please. So like everybody else, we've looked very hard at, at online. And of course, we're a festival centre. We run 4 or 5 festivals a year. All of those are now online. And we also have, artists performing online work out in our theatres, but with no audiences other than online. And we've had to rethink that. As you all have. But some of it's been good. We've learned a lot. Some of it's been not so good. But I guess, one of the things that it's really enabled us to do with our festivals, for instance, a bite-sized cabaret approach, is that we've actually been able to stay in touch with our audiences, and that's been particularly true with interactive activities like our international guitar competition. Next slide, please. Now, in 2020, this year, we're well known in our country for our AusAsia Festival. This year, we just appointed a very distinguished Asian Australian, Annette Chunwa, to run this festival. But this year it will all be webinars, ideas and thoughts about Asian-Australian connections. Now, to Yvonne's point, I think there is no more important time for our country to maintain connections with Asia, particularly from a cultural point of view. And particularly given the fact that Australia is one of the most multicultural countries on earth, the role of the arts in social cohesion at this time within our communities is particularly important. Next slide, please. So education. So online, this was one of the areas which straight away our education team jumped into. And you can imagine with schools sometimes in lockdown, or people simply, or kids not attending school, the requirement and the need and the demand for online material, which was different from, which could have maybe enhanced curriculum, was particularly important. So education is a very big, and learning is a very big area for us. We have Dream Big Festival, etc. But on the education side, the work that we're doing with education authorities and with schools direct, with teachers, this has been such an important area for us. Next slide, please. So again, getting back to those international connections. So being a UNESCO City of Music and having that international network, but particularly the network within Asia Pacific in terms of artists collaborating, in terms of setting up projects, exchanging work, collaborating on work, and particularly, where people can work from home and collaborate from home across the globe. This has been such a fundamentally important connection for us. Next slide, please. So in many ways, all of this, of course, there is no touring in Australia, there is no international touring, there is no state touring. So we're locked down within our own city and state. And so it's thrown our impetus back in working really more definitively and openly and creatively with our home companies, resident companies, and the artists in this state. So we're working with all these companies in ways that we perhaps wouldn't in the past. And the key facts here are, I think, that we have waived venue rental for the rest of the year. And so things are beginning to happen that couldn't happen before financially. And the second thing is we are enabled to do 50% attendance with our venues at this stage. So that's opened up a number of possibilities. Next slide, please. Okay, so, all of you have got these kind of protocols, I'm sure. For us, the situation is, and we're just about to go into it, that our venues have opened up to 50% on a checkerboard seating basis. That throws an extraordinary amount of onus and responsibility on us in terms of managing this process with audiences, with artists, with backstage staff, making sure that all the protocols work in the foyers as well as working in the theatres. So I think, as to my knowledge, we're the first state that has allowed this sort of configuration and this level of attendance within Australia. So in a way, we're really at cutting edge here. But we're also extremely aware of the extraordinary responsibility. I have to say, audience appetite for coming out and participating in this work has been remarkable. So definitely the demand is there. Next slide, please. So as Yvonne said, in all of this, here we are opening a brand new theatre, 1,500 seats, and we look forward to inviting you all to the grand opening when it happens. But a brand new theatre in an old skin there, dating back to 1913. But this has been a spark of hope and optimism in our community. The response to this has been fantastic. We've got about 6,000 donors who've contributed to this. We're running tours in this building because it has great history and so forth. But I think not only for the arts community, but for the community at large, this has been a beacon of hope, and for artists and audiences and arts workers alike. So, to end the slides, I just wanted to wrap up if I could. Look, I think we have to think very hard about our stakeholders, and I'm not just talking about the obvious ones, but of course course, the artists and the creative organisations, our donors, our audiences, our governments, all of them are important. But I think, you know, allies are like friends. If you want one, first of all, you have to be one. And so it's been reaching out to our partners, and we're working very hard at it to say, look, we want to be a leader in this. We want to be a collaborator in this. How can we help the community? How can we get our stakeholders to understand what we're doing? So I think so far, so good. But like everybody, you know, every day is a new day with this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Douglas. I think, you know, the experiences of Adelaide have shown how an art center tries to stay positive and lead at a time of that. I think I picked up several phrases in Douglas' presentation, and beacon of hope was one of them. In a time of trauma, if you do need resilience, then you need to know that there is something to work towards. And that gives me a way to introduce Ken, because yesterday as we were talking, I asked Ken, you know, what was that one thing in Aichi that, and in your presentation that you wanted to flag out? And then he was sharing that, you know, every time now, when there is a performance that does happen or an activity that does happen at the art center, it somehow makes the front page of the newspapers. You know, and you know, as arts workers, we are constantly trying to get the arts out to people, right? And it cold comfort, I would say, but still, at a time like that, it really does show that the arts then provides that sense of hope to people. And despite the challenges that I think as art centers we are also facing, if we can lead and we can be generous in a time like that, then we can create those platforms that are hopeful for society. So with that, I would like to introduce Ken. Ken is the Deputy Chief as well as the Head of PR and Marketing at Aichi Art Center. And you know, he's going to tell us a lot more of what's happening at his art center.
Thank you, Yvonne. And you took my line. Anyway. Hello, I'm Ken Hayashi from Aichi Art Center, Japan. It's my pleasure to be here as one of the panelists for this session too. But let's talk. So let's talk. Today, I'd like to share where our center is heading to as a cultural institution of the region and why. Well, unfortunately, Japan is in the midst of the second wave of the pandemic, so it may not be a good example, but I hope it may give you an idea or ideas of what we have to face sooner or later. Well, let me quickly review what we went through. The state of emergency for all prefectures in Japan was declared on April 16th. We closed our center from April 25th to June 1st. These are the picture of us taking off the advertisement of Alice's Adventure in Wonderland. This is the ballet production of the new National Theatre of Japan, who also is a member of this AAPPAC, and it was supposed to be the highlight of our season. Anyway, the state of emergency was lifted on May 25th, so we slowly and carefully restarted the activities. And these are what we've done so far since then. Aichi Art Center teaches a class for Nagoya University of the Arts. We started the first class online and the second and later offline, I mean in person. This was challenging, but it wasn't too hard because it was sedentary. You just sit and listen, sometimes falling asleep, like you used to do. Also, you're teaching with limited numbers of people. So we decided to try a whole seminar on Zoom. We asked a lecturer to lecture from Kobe City. It's a far city from Aichi, without the risk of infection and also the transportation fee. And the time has come for real performance. A dance work by Mr. Teshigawara, artistic director of our theater. This was the first performing arts program we hosted after the merge of COVID-19. So this production, I think, gave a strong message of, yes, we're gonna do it, not only for our audiences, but also for our employees. Then we started a dance workshop on Zoom. We had 2 lecturers, one from Tokyo and one from Kumamoto. And the students are from Kanagawa, Kyoto, Osaka, and Fukuoka. For those who are not familiar with Japanese geography, it means everywhere, everywhere from Japan. This implies, as you can easily imagine, that we can expand our market by using online distribution. Finally, we had a pipe organ concert last week. We limited the audience numbers by 1/3, so we could accommodate only 600 audiences, although we have 1,800 seats. In addition to that, the second wave of the pandemic struck us, like I mentioned earlier, and the ticket sales completely stopped. I mean, completely stopped. So it ended up with 262 audiences for the night concert and 135 for the day concert. Yet many local promoters and organizers visited the concert to see how we do all this. They actually thanked us for being a mentor for the performing arts in the region. We also had to cancel the show called The Princess and the Pea by Hans Christian Andersen. So instead we made a Snakes and Ladder, a kind of board game based upon the same story, and Color by Number too. Yes. Then we created a new production of Fairy Tale by Andersen that allows only 4 groups of people at once. The maximum number for one group is 4 persons, and we run 4 shows per day. Also, we run this production only for 3 days. That means we can accommodate 192 audiences at most. Evidently, it's not cost effective at all, but we did it anyway. Also, we are dramatizing a whole new play and may live stream online. By the way, don't you think it's much nicer and easier to put on English subtitles in post-production instead of translating everything first and make actors and actresses to memorize them and perform with terror of forgetting their lines? In a way, we are now open to entire world only if we wish and try. So what's next? Hopefully, we'll be able to initiate a program called Art Caravan, so to speak, performing arts festival subsidized by Agency of Cultural Affairs of Japan. This art festival are going to take place in 25 regions in Japan. The festival is designed to reboot the art activities in each region. Therefore, the program should be deployed at not only our center, but also other places in the region. The budget for this project for one region is $486,000 US. That means $12 million US in total of 25 regions. The Japanese government also has other various subsidiary plans, including loans and cash payment for professional performing arts groups and freelance performers as well. And so do the prefecture of Aichi and city of Nagoya. So we are very lucky, although some people say that they're not enough. Now we're working on online tour of the Center for Kids and online organ concert for kids. It's hard to see them as replacement for what we used to do. I have to agree that you may not enjoy online contents as well as real ones, but if you see them as educational programs that you do for free anyway, online distribution may be very, very useful and effective. And if you take a pill and think, it's something we should have done before the emerge of COVID-19. Again, it's hard to monetize these online contents, but if you rethink what we are supposed to do in the first place as Performing Arts Center for the region, I think you know the answer. With a lot of support from national and local government, Performing Arts Center in Japan have to think why the administrative institutions are helping us. Is it okay to expend the tax money for the performing arts? Do the taxpayer understand for the art consumption in the midst of this disaster? Are they convinced? I'm almost done, but I'd like to point out one thing. Like Yvonne said, when we reopen the center and restart the concert plays and others, it makes the front page headline of the newspaper and the TVs. I think that is the social impact of the performing arts. Social impact is as important as economic impact. And finally, one of the most important things for us is to send a message to the region or the community. The message may vary from center to center, but we should keep sending message to tell people that we need them as much as they need us. Performing Arts Center are places needed for everyone, anytime, anywhere in the world. Thank you. Back to Yvonne.
Thank you, Ken. You know, he's made a perfect pitch. If you need this to speak to your governments, you know, we borrow Ken's lines to speak to your funders on the social impact and role of art centers. But we all know that the art center or cultural institutions, you know, we do our work only because there are artists. And one of the core things, you know, the amount of creativity that can come out of a time like that, it's not because arts managers on our own have dreamt up these ideas. Many of that comes from artists, as you have also seen from Ken's example. And our next speaker on the panel manages a group of artists, and he has done the homework of going to his artists and asking them, what would you like to see at a time like this? What is it that you can do to help people, the society, get through a period of social and economic, again, resilience or recovery, whichever way you choose to see this. And so, you know, our next speaker is Dongjin, Mr. Yoon Dongjin. He is the president of the Bridge Company in South Korea, and he manages, it's an artist management company. So in some ways, that provides a really kind of interesting other perspective to our current panel, who are mainly operating art centers. Let's hear from, in a way, artists, and what is it that artists are wanting to see at a time like that. So over to you, Dongjin.
Thank you. Hi, I believe this is my first time to greet the AAPPAC members. I'm Dongjin Yoon, and I'm currently running a classical music company. I do artist management and Korean tours for foreign artists, and orchestra operation and the execution of government arts programs. I am working closely with the artists, and today I want to share the opinions of the artists as well as my own. Next, please. Yes, thank you. COVID-19 completely destroyed the system of the world of art, and artists lost their stages to perform, and the audiences have a fear about coming to art centers. And artists who came to South Korea from different countries to provide diversity in cultures can no longer be found in South Korea right now. And on the other hand, Korean artists lost their opportunities to perform overseas. Artists lost their base to perform and have to fight for survival right now. Next slide, please. I had conversations with artists and artistic groups about what artists can do in the present times of COVID-19. And all of you might think the same at first. It is for artists to perform. Performing to get rid of isolation and fear is the only thing that the artists can do in this most undesirable period. Next. In most art centers, distancing between the seats are in progress. Audiences have to wear masks and temperature check is done before entrance, and the contact information of all the audiences are identified by filing out charts. In spite of all this, people are still scared. However, artists are demonstrating in different ways that performances are possible despite these poor conditions. Next, please. There were interesting stages in South Korea, and one of them is a balcony concert. It was a concert held in the middle of an apartment complex so that people can enjoy music from their apartment balconies without any concern about getting infected. And also, there was drive-in concert, and it took place in a parking spaces outside, and people could enjoy concert in their cars. So people in hundreds of cars could enjoy concert together. Just like the examples of the performances, artists are trying to help heal the wounds of our community and forget about the pain through performing arts. They are willing to devote themselves through their performances in this tough time. And next, yes. Before the situation of COVID-19, the present condition, and the time after everything becomes settled, the most important role of the artist is still to perform. However, after the outbreak of COVID-19, the role of the artist is not just to perform. Number one is cooperation between the government and government agencies. There isn't a single artist that did not experience any hardship from COVID-19. Government and government agencies provided urgent support for the art. There were supportive programs before, but it wasn't as supportive for the art compared to this time. Moreover, governments and agencies tried to hold a lot of conversations with the artists this time, and as a result, different supportive policies and measures were designed so that concerts can be held in the current situation. I am also getting support from the government for my employees, and one of my artists received financial support from a local cultural foundation so that the artists can sustain artistic activity with having online concert. Through these supports, artists and artist groups will show an eagerness to cooperate with government and agencies. If the same situation hits again, then artists can ask for help from the government agencies instead of agonizing over it alone, and the agencies can also work with the artists and gain ideas so that the citizens can enjoy arts even difficult situations. Number two is a cooperation with art centers. With the outbreak of COVID-19, art centers provided great support to the artists. Different performances like online, outdoor, and balcony concerts, those kind of concerts were planned to design programs so that the artists can perform no matter what. And the artists were able to gain a little bit of a profit due to their efforts. One of my artists was scheduled to perform once every 2 months in a local concert hall in this year. It's supposed to start from March, but the number of confirmed cases suddenly increased in February. So the March concert had to be canceled. However, from May, online concerts were operated, and it was a thoughtful consideration of the concert hall so that the artists could start the concert series. In the catastrophe that nobody has experienced before, art centers and artists have worked together closely more than any other times. In addition, both realized that their collaboration must continue even after this situation becomes settled. And number three is expansion of outreach programs. Until now, the activities in art centers were considered as the main part for artists. However, After the situation, the artists realized how much pleasure and comfort art can provide to people. As the artists held outreach programs, they learned that many people that they met during the performances were those who normally did not visit art centers. After COVID-19, artists will think deeply about a greater variety in outreach programs. The balcony concert or drive-in concert mentioned earlier are some of the examples. People who did not know how to come in contact with art or did not have a chance to encounter art or did not even consider enjoying art gained pleasure through art and learned about its value. This is how the artists came in contact with them in this time, and they would love to keep trying to interact with many more people. And the last one is programming about diversity. We are facing isolation that we have not experienced before. National boundaries have been closed and it is difficult to travel between countries. Also, ignorance and misunderstanding caused people to witness mockery and violence to countries with many confirmed cases of the virus or those who are from the continent. Artists should speak about the diversity of art so that these problems do not continue. All countries and cultures must be respected, and artists should use art to show that mutual understanding is necessary. The way to practice it is by performing various cultural works of art and also developing a new repertoire about other cultures. With reason, collaboration with artists from different cultures must resume just like how it was before the situation of COVID. I believe that the roles of the artist will become more important with time. Also, an artist manager working closely with the artist, I realized that I should play the role as a bridge between the artists and the art centers and the artists and the government agencies and empower their communication. Thank you.
Thanks, Dongjin. You know, Dongjin has shared the perspective of artists, and in a way, as I was talking to Chris yesterday, I think, Chris, who is the artistic director and the vice president of the Cultural Center in Philippines, what he shared too was that even though he's speaking from the perspective of a cultural center, he's just been amazed by the ground up energies of artists at a time like that. And sometimes in times of resilience, institutions must learn from the individual and not the other way around. We get that support from the individual instead. And I was also reminded by how digitally connected people are in the Philippines, you know, so maybe in a time like that, the mobile phone has replaced the art center. It's become a mobile art center and we carry it in our pockets. So without further ado, I'm just going to invite Chris to share with us how artists in the Philippines and how the Cultural Center has been in the heart of this kind of digital, in a way, a digital transformation for many of their activities.
Thank you, Yvonne. Good morning, good day, everyone. I'm speaking to you from the suburb of Manila, which is actually 2 hours on a good day from work, where I've been working at home since the lockdown 6 months ago. Yes, we have been one of the longest countries in lockdown since March, and the center has remained closed. And we've just a few days ago, we reverted back to what we call a modified enhanced quarantine, which actually in so many words just means reverting back to a lockdown. So what you see behind me is a virtual background of a space at the center where we last hosted the meeting last year of the AAPPAC. So that the AAPPAC meeting was one of the last large gatherings we've had at the center. And following through what Yvonne just said about learning from the ground up, I'm happy to say that right before that, we had a timely organizing of different performing art spaces around Metro Manila and different parts of the Philippines, which we've called the Association of Performing Arts Spaces. And some of them are here on board right now listening. And I'm pretty sure they have their own specific stories to tell, as well as their own independent initiatives in terms of responding to COVID. But what I'm going to share this morning is the story of CCP as a government arts center and how it has responded to the COVID so far. Next, please. So the sharing will be in 3 parts. I will be sharing the impact of COVID on the arts and cultural sector, which might have already been shared by our past speakers. And this definitely is a shared experience across the region. The impact specifically on CCP programs and the priority programs in a time of COVID and the post-COVID recovery period. And this is already in implementation, and I will be sharing some updates on some of the activities and projects that we have initiated. Next, please. So when COVID struck, the whole sector was not ready for the health crisis, and this is the same experience, I think, not only for the whole country, but for some of the countries around the world. In a recent report and research by our own local Department of Trade of Industry, we were informed that the arts and entertainment industry, including the tourism industry, would be the industries that be slowest to recover during the post-COVID recovery period, understandably because of the nature and characteristic of our work, which involves a lot of face-to-face dealings and negotiations with both in the process of creation and distribution and production. But we do recognize that we do have a community that has innate characteristics of strength. And one of these that has kept us going is our robust social capital. Largely unorganized, largely independent. We have plenty of artists and cultural workers who've been doing a lot of their own work independent of government funding. And to a certain degree, this has helped them survive. To a certain degree, nothing has changed for them because I guess the added challenge is now, of course, the health crisis challenge. But otherwise, in terms of improvising on available resources, the situation has remained the same. We have hale and hearty talents and hefty content. Apparently, a lot of these organizations have also banking on a lot of digital content, which for a while were just considered digital files and archives, but now has gained a certain value as prime real estate, especially now that everyone's scrambling for online content. There's a high level of volunteerism. In the first part of 2 weeks of the quarantine period, the first people to go online and start to create content that would inspire and boost morale were the artists. In fact, they went beyond just creation and even put up kitchens, delivered personal protective equipment to the frontliners and so on. And they continue to do so up to today, even with limited budgets themselves. The artists were early adapters to digital technology, and I think this could be said largely about Filipinos. As you know, the Philippines is one of the largest owners of mobile phones and mobile devices, and I think 90% of our population is connected. And this is both a boon and a bane, because with the explosion of online content, of course, it also opens itself up to a lot of misinformation. So there's been this back and forth too in terms of what is inspiring out there and what could be totally demoralizing because of the large number of information that goes out there unfiltered. And we've seen this as an opportunity for mobilizing the network for the local and national responses to COVID and to broaden the engagement, especially now with the power of online connection, where once audiences were discouraged to even go to CCP because of traffic. Now they have no excuse with just a click of their mouse, they could connect to our online content. And the Philippines being an archipelagic nation, it used to be that only Metro Manila audiences could walk in live to our performances and workshops and other activities. Now, audiences and communities as far as the southern part of Mindanao, the central islands of Visayas, can connect with us in terms of our online programs. Next. So what has been the impact of, on CCP? At least 800 events were canceled. 3,000 artists, cultural workers, and production staff were affected. 800,000 audiences, participants lost due to the cancellation. Please remember, if, for our colleagues at AAPPAC, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of CCP last year, and we were escalating our engagement to hit 1 million this year. But of course, when COVID hit, things have to change. And we were supposed to cap the celebration this year in September. At least 90 million revenue loss in terms of sales. And this we're just talking about box office and rentals of our spaces. And this is around $2 million, if I'm not mistaken. And numerous suppliers affected. All our performance and exhibit venues remain closed. All rehearsal venues are closed. Businesses in the complex are affected. We sit in a 60-hectare lot, so we have tenants ranging from restaurants and parking providers and so on. So a lot of them have informed us of their ending of their lease, which is a major source of our revenues. And of course, the government has put up their own law and mandate, as emergency mandate for the quarantine period, and they call this the Heal as One Act. And we've been asked to absorb a 50% budget cut in terms of operations. Next, please. So given this, what has been our imperative in terms as a cultural center, it could be encapsulated in this: protect lives and livelihoods while continuing to deliver educational and inspiring content to Filipinos. So the underlying tone of this is survival. And the underlying tone of this is surviving, but looking for ways to continue to connect to audiences and artists. Next, please. So we've adopted certain strategies. We've recalibrated our strategies. First strategy is to ensure that Filipinos continue to benefit from the educational and healing properties of the arts. Next. The next strategy is to protect livelihood in the arts and culture sector by continuing to employ artists in alternative production and distribution platforms, and to invest in capabilities that equip artists and cultural workers to innovate on methods of production and distribution, and collaborate with artists to digitize content. Next. So given these strategies, we came up with priority areas. These are projects, programs that might be a hybrid of activities that we used to do live at our venues. First is the Arts and Culture Online, which we immediately initiated 2 weeks into the quarantine period in March. We have video streaming of archival recordings, HD edited recordings, and production of new content. We had a we are now putting together a time capsule. What amazing thing that's happening right now is artists are responding in very creative ways online independently, and there's been an explosion of this content, and we would like to document this artistic response, and we've come up with a digital time capsule documenting the arts in the time of COVID. Next is we're now in the pipeline is where our existing galleries and museums are creating virtual exhibits. We have partnerships and collaborations for fundraising. We've made, since we have a rich collection of digital files and archival recordings, groups have come up to us and said, can we have access to these recordings so we can use this for fundraising purposes? So we've collaborated in those ways. Some have been quite successful in terms of uploading it their own and raising some substantial funds for their own upkeep and survival. Online resources to supplement home schooling. We collaborate closely with the Department of Education as they create curriculum for distance learning and home learning. Live arts in lockdown. We've migrated selected festivals and activities to the online platform. One of our recent most successful experiments was the Virgin Lab Fest, a theater festival which has been very popular with audiences that we do yearly. These are one-act play festivals that usually attracts about 200 playwrights and directors and actors and really young audiences. And we decided to go online. And it was very interesting. We didn't have any clue how to do it online. But what happened was the directors and the actors, with their verve and their own knack for improvisation, were able to come up with very interesting and exciting hybrid productions, combining both live Zoom performances and recorded performances. And I'm also very proud to announce that because of this hybrid experimentation, at least 3 of these titles have been considered in independent film festivals. It has crossed the line to another genre. We have upcycled content incorporating live interviews, and then, of course, focusing on arts for therapy. We develop and implement modules on arts for well-being. The Philippine Philharmonic Orchestra has initiated by requests, special requests from frontliners, from patients in COVID hospitals, relatives who are supporting loved ones in a health crisis, can specifically contact our members of the orchestra to play their special songs that might aid them in healing and inspiration. Capacity building, training modules for upskilling of artists and cultural workers in digital communications technology production. There's been a uptick in terms of the interest. In the past, whenever we call for orientation in terms of intellectual property rights, artists wouldn't usually mind it. But when we called for this early on, it was one of our best-selling events. About more than 1,000 artists came in just to listen to intellectual property experts, to inform them about what they own, how they manage the content that they own, and how they can earn from what they own. Next, please. Basically, we would always say sarado ang gusali, tuloy ang sining, which in English is the building is closed, but art continues. So today, we are opening yet another big event, which is one of our major festivals at the center. This is the Sinimalaya Philippine Independent Film Festival, which attracts about 55,000 during live events. We've put up a complete online platform, which launched this morning at 12:01 a.m. and it will be on till August 16, with at least 170 short film titles, workshops, talkbacks, virtual exhibits, and so on and so forth. We try to approximate as much energy, creative energy, as the live event had. Of course, there continues to be issues that we continue to face, and we still don't have answers for, and this is shared, I think, with the other centers, which is how do we monetize our online activities and make this sustainable? How do we continue to guard ourselves against piracy, especially that's another dimension that we're facing? And third, how do we strategize ourselves in terms of entering the new normal, given all the protocols that might challenge us in terms of creation and audience engagement? So with that, thank you very much for your time. And we, from the Cultural Center of the Philippines, the Association of Asian Performing Arts Spaces, and the artist community in Manila and the Philippines, we wish your continued safety and health.
Thank you, Chris. We don't have that much time, but I think we should still devote time to questions. I don't see any questions yet on the chat, and I would really have rather have the questions come from you. I do have some questions, but maybe I'll start it off while you guys type it down. Okay. I have 2 questions. Maybe one that's directly to Douglas. You've offered your venues free at a time where your government has cut funding to you. So I'm curious, what has come out of that? Free venues. What value has come of that for the arts community? And, you know, how has that shaped or changed how the Arts Center thinks of itself? And then for the rest of us who have been doing lots of digital content, you know, from the Philippines to Aichi, in South Korea as well, besides monetizing, which I think we are all at a midst of kind of thinking about it, right? The music industry went through that when it was free, and then slowly people got addicted and then they started to pay. It was the same with video content. There was so much piracy, but we've started to create, you know, people now subscribe to Netflix and pay for that. So I think it's probably a long journey, but we'll eventually get there. But besides monetizing in areas of digital technology, wanted to ask the rest of the panelists, what are the other challenges or you know, most exciting idea that you have discovered while trying to bring the arts online? So 2 questions. One, when it comes to, you know, really cute, strange things that you would never do with a venue and now you would do, for instance, offer entirely free, as well as on the digital front, the new things or the most challenging things that you may have experienced in the last few months that have caused you to rethink the arts on the digital platform. So just throwing those 2 questions out to our panelists while we wait for our participants to ask.
Okay, so I'll jump in because I think you directed the question to me first up. Thank you, Yvonne. I would say in terms of the venue rental situation for us and offer, you know, it's venue rental, which has been waived. It's not the hard costs or the labor costs, which together with some of these ensembles, we've had to work collaboratively to see how we can cover those costs. But the government has been right behind us with this venue rental wave. And I must say our state government has been extremely supportive. And indeed, the Premier is the Arts Minister, and he's taken a direct role in saying, how can we do more work with the local companies and artists and present it in a way that we couldn't before. So there's been a very strong commitment there, and for which we've been very grateful. I think in terms of online, yeah, monetizing is one thing, but I think the democracy of it has really appealed to us. We've got to people that we've never got to before. We've had to rethink how we shape that content and how we think about engagement. And I think in that quest to get the best out of that engagement through online, it has forced us as creators and arts workers and distributors and marketeers and educators to think very hard about the responsibilities in our community for arts centres going forward. It's been a good thing.
Any of the other panelists would like to share, particularly on, you know, a bit deeper about your digital initiatives, anything that's really worked or has been kind of revelatory to you?
Well, may I?
Yeah.
From the experience of CCP and its online programs, what it has done is it has encouraged a lot of collaboration, especially between the audiovisual artists. That means the filmmakers are now collaborating with live theater practitioners, as well as the visual artists, now trying collaborating in interdisciplinary ways with the end goal of coming up with really engaging and exciting projects online. So that I think these online projects have have stimulated this kind of exciting collaborations.
Right. Well, that's interesting. Dongjin or Ken?
In terms of online, if I have a really, really good idea, I'm not going to tell you. Just kidding. No one is ahead or behind in terms of this pandemic. So I just want to tell everyone that we should take advantage of this network of AAPPAC to exchange ideas and share thoughts for our own goods. That's all I can say for now.
Okay. Is there anything, Dongjin, that you would like to add if we have some other questions, but Dongjin, I think you're muted.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, Dongjin, you're muted, so I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, actually, I have a little, the artists and most of my colleagues have different actually ideas in South Korea, because there are so many video contents right now, like online concerts and recorded concerts everywhere. So as an artist and artist managers, we think we just hope it just end, but we just, okay, to be honest, we are not really welcome to the online videos, because sometimes art centers ask us, okay, we cannot make any benefit from this video, making this video. So artists, why don't you participate with like low payment or, lower fee? Even we had a hard time too. So, so I basically not really like the idea of having more online contents, but the Ken has actually made a great idea about having this kind of online contents to educational purpose. I think this is really great idea, because we don't have much of contents for education actually in art sector. So I think it could be a really great idea. I think I could share with this idea with my colleagues as well.
Okay. I think what Dongjin has shared is very real. When we can't monetize, then down the road for the rest of the economy, it just means the artists don't get paid as much, and that's not great. So I take it that maybe in subsequent sessions, we could look at this challenge of, what does the digital really, really mean in terms of providing sustainability? What are some of the new ways in which we can make sense of this platform vis-a-vis our physical centers? So I think that that's probably something that deserves its own session. There are some questions, and I'm just going to, one of it's very practical, which is about testing. And I do not know whether any of us have experiences in our cities where there is mass testing. Ariel has asked that from CCP, and Soler, who's also in Manila, has answered to say that they themselves have a testing center in Soler. But I wonder, is testing part of the protocol in your art centers for admitting patients, admitting audiences? I don't think in Esplanade or in Singapore we are ever going to do that, because like one test is $300. So just putting it out there. Any of your art centers actually thinking of mass testing as a way of admitting audiences? I see heads being shaken. So that's the answer for Ariel. Nope, mass testing is probably something governments may do, but not something as part of admitting. There was a question, very practical one, about mold. It's like housekeeping question, right? As many of our centers are closed, it is true. We do have operational challenges with keeping, but I think mold is creepy. In that, most of you can see what that center has tried to do. I think it comes from shacks, but one thing I would say from Esplanede's experience is that you may want to check the temperature of your aircon. That sometimes when the aircon is too cold, it actually promotes mold. So it looks like you've really done a lot of things like nano coating and all that. So it should solve the problem. But actually, I think the temperature may have an issue. Sorry, this is like housekeeping question. But let's move on to another question about strategy. And this goes out to everyone, which is, has marketing changed for your art center? Are you developing new marketing strategies to reach out to your audiences? And I think for many of us, our audiences are quite broad. So, in a time of COVID, are we still looking at broad audiences, or are we developing strategies that are more concentrated and on target audiences? And are there groups of audiences that we cannot even reach at a time like that? So that's a question that has come from Anthony to everyone. How has your marketing strategy changed at a time like that? Any of the panelists would like to start first on this?
Yes, may I start? We'd had to shift in a big way to digital marketing. Where once digital marketing was just enhancing what we had in terms of traditional marketing, now it has taken center stage and has now been foregrounded. and digital marketing is more targeted. We've learned from digital marketing that we cannot anymore come up with broad and generic communications, but we have to target it on specific platforms. For example, millennials are more on Twitter. The certain demographic is on Facebook, and there are people who just don't even go onto social media, but would just like to see how they can access and buy tickets immediately. And there are people who prefer freebies and might need a little bit more convincing because they've been used to getting free content online. So these are some just of the nuances now that we're beginning to build specific strategies for in terms of marketing, which is quite different from how we did it traditionally.
Yep, go ahead, Douglas.
Yeah, I think we've had to think very hard about it. And so we're doing a lot of online polling with audiences to try and understand their predisposition about coming back to theatres. We're also trying to engage them with online content to get them to react to it. And I think one of the other areas, and the new theatre has helped us with this, because we've had, I think about 5,500, 6,000 donors to help with the building fund. So again, that has been a way to engage, again online, but in some cases directly, but has been yet another tool that we've been able to use to engage audiences and engage the community when performances haven't been taking place. So online, as Chris said, has just become so much important, but to find a way that it can be interactive. And of course, I think we're attracting people to that online, those online facilities that we've never attracted before.
Mm. Ken, our PR and in a way marketing expert here.
Not really, because we don't have a company's credit card. Most publicly funded art center in Japan don't have credit card, and of course, lots of payment online are by credit card. So that's a problem we have. Maybe it's the same in Korea. Is it, Panjin?
Yeah, Korea is the same.
Oh, sorry. So you're saying that as art centers, you don't accept credit card payment, or you're not able to?
Don't have a credit card, company's credit card.
I see. So you can't subscribe to many services, etc.
Right.
Right.
I think Korea has the foundation and art centers have a credit card, but I'm not sure they could. It depends on really how their formation. If they are directly to the city, maybe they don't have, but if they are a private foundation, I think they have one, but I'm not really sure.
Okay. Well, it's I think this period has kind of forced lots of us to change ways of operations. So I agree with Chris. A year ago or two, Esplanade, for instance, has moved most of its bulk of its marketing online. But even on the operational front, it's really pushed us to think about e-tickets. There are certain demographics who like physical tickets, but I think as a result of this, the whole push towards having digital tickets, the using of QR codes, because in Singapore, for instance, in order to enter many spaces, you have to scan a QR code. So it's also completely changed in the last few months, people's attitudes to using QR codes to download information, to log in information. And I think that's going to change how physical theaters or performances may admit people. That's one. Another change beyond marketing, but in a way it's integrated. I think increasingly technology will integrate not just how marketing works, but then how the entire transaction works. And the experience at the center. Again, that's another topic to think about, how seamlessly we can integrate technology into the experience of somebody attending a concert or a performance before and after. There was a question that
Yvonne, can I just add one thing to that, if I may? I think my marketing director has just texted me, and she's absolutely right, is that one of the keys for us, I think, in attracting audiences back, it's an absolutely prime ingredient that they must feel safe.
Yes.
And so, you know, we have worked very closely with health officials to make sure that our approach is seamless. And I would say all the online polling just reinforces that, and everything that we do in encouraging people to come back is the key ingredient is it's safe.
Okay. Yeah. I think that leads me on to the next question that Monani has asked. Whether the panel would like to share any thoughts on how best to make people feel safe. I think we have had varying levels of confidence. On one hand, I think some of the polls, people have, well, about 60%. That's what I've been gathering in the last few months. About 60% feel safe coming back. But now in recent weeks with the resurgence of, you know, second waves, I wonder whether that confidence is now shaken. So asking, you know, our artist managers and CEOs out there, the question is, how do you think you can help people feel safe stepping out again?
If I may, maybe to follow through what Douglas just said, maybe in terms of making people feel safe, I think people should feel safer stepping out of their houses. So this goes back to a larger context in terms of how our specific countries and governments are managing and dealing with the pandemic. So to a certain degree, this might be a bit pessimistic in terms of outlook, but it actually, a lot of our work is in that, in the way how we build confidence specific to our centers, is how basically our countries and governments might deal with this pandemic itself.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else on, maybe Douglas, since you did welcome 20 people into your venue, you know?
Well, yeah, look, I think the thing is, you know, we had a presentation to our board last night, trying to explain to them, given the fact that we're getting a bit of a resurgence of infections here, just how we would deal with this 50% rule. And you can imagine there was some nervousness. And so there is no question that, like everybody else in every other situation, this is changing almost daily, hourly. And so the important thing that we feel is that we have to be extremely agile with this. And so if we have to make changes in terms of restrictions, it looks, for instance, now that we won't be able to serve beverages. We'll be able to get people into the theatre, but we won't be able to have queues up to the bars, etc. And so how do our front of house staff deal with that? I think, you know, the ability to think quickly, work very closely with the health authorities in this is absolutely paramount. And of course, the training and dealing with our front of house staff and dealing with, you know, our audiences, for whom a lot of this will be entirely new. Some of them won't be happy about sitting in a checkerboard arrangement. They want to sit close with their friends and family and so forth. And again, our front of house staff will need to deal with that, you know, sensitively but firmly. And at the same time, the protocols which are happening out in the foyers and indeed allowing people into the theatre, and all of the protocols backstage with artists and with crew, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, there's a lot of work being done in terms of the human resources and safety plans and risk plans with all our staff, artists, front of house, and as best we can to try and communicate that to an audience, the audiences before they come. And, you know, and sure, we can do a lot of that online, but we also have elderly folks who don't use the internet. So how do you deal with that? So it's a very big communications program, and I would say it's logistically heavy, much more demanding in terms of resources than we would normally experience under non-COVID circumstances.
Anything else from Ken or Dongjin on?
Yes, I kind of reiterate what I mentioned earlier in the presentation, but you have to keep sending message, and maybe you do it yourself. I mean, do the concerts in place by yourself, and show how it should be done, and that will be a good message to all, I think.
Yeah. So if sorry, and I hear a voice. You know, Rochelle's pinged me to say that our time's running out. I'd just like to sum it up very broadly to say, actually, we're all trying to find ways to change our operations and our mode of working with artists, both creatively, artistically, but also on the very practical front. And perhaps this seems like yet another topic that maybe we could focus on, you know. I recall the example in Tokyo where there was a bit of a cluster in a theater because the artist, despite having a bit of a cold, felt that he should turn up and act. So you know, I echo Chris to say it is about the whole nation or the whole city. It's not, it can't just be the role of the art center in something like this, and then personal responsibilities of that society. But then as art centers, as leaders within society, we have to set that right tone. And what Ken has said is just keep sending out the message. So for many of us, it's constantly nagging our staff, nagging our artists, if you're not well, stay at home, and then nagging across the center with the messages that we put out, right? And setting in protocols, being as agile and being as careful and cautious. Better be careful rather than being kind of taking certain risks at a time like that. I think that's the attitude that we have in a time of resilience. I would say more resilience than recovery, like that. There was a question about surveys, and I think if everybody read the chat group, I think many countries are conducting surveys as to audience attitudes. So what I will ask the Secretariat to do is that if any of you have national surveys or art center surveys that you think are useful to share with this platform, please send the link to the Secretariat, and we'll be happy to distribute that together with the slides of our presenters. So that would be one of the follow-up from today's meeting. We would share whatever survey results we have, as well as the slides. I think that is about it, and I hand the time back to our host, the Secretariat, as well as to Douglas. Thank you, everyone, for being so generous with your ideas and your questions. I hope even if you didn't, you may have heard something new, or even if you didn't hear anything new, you felt comforted by the shared experience that we have in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne, and thank you once again to our speakers, Chris, Dongjin, Douglas, Ken, privilege as always to work with you, and thank you for sharing with us. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We value your feedback, we welcome your feedback, so please complete the survey that we will send out after today's session. We have incorporated most of your feedback into today's session, and we want to do better for the third one. So speaking of the third one, the session 3 will be hosted by West Kowloon Cultural District Authority. It will be on Friday, 11th of September. The topic would be how are institutions adapting their business models to address an evolving new normal. So please do join us. The session will be moderated by Duncan Pescott, the CEO of West Kowloon. That's the QR code that you can scan, use your phones right now and scan to register early. So thank you. Douglas, back to you, please.
Well, thank you, Rochelle, and thank you, Yvonne, and all the speakers. I really appreciate it. And I thank all the participants who've come into this session. I would say that I'm particularly pleased that we have people who are new to APAC And I've encouraged a number of the executive committee members and others of you who are APAC members or not, if you want to encourage people to who are non-APAC to participate in these seminars, webinars, please do so, because I think that's the power of what we have here. We are probably the most preeminent regional cultural association network. So let's use it positively at this time. So if you know people who you think would be interested and benefit from this set of webinars, then please encourage them to take part. I also think that look, there are many subjects that we could discuss. We've heard a number of online extension of these things. Would be really interesting possible topics for webinars beyond the 3 that we've currently scheduled. And I do think, and Yvonne is just reminding me, that the notion of regional collaboration here is really important. That's another area that we should discuss further down the track. So I'm hopeful that we can conduct more webinars. We want to do that. We've had a lot of interest, but please, if you've got views on topics that you think would be good to discuss or information to share, please come back to us with that. So we look forward to your participation in the next one, to be hosted by West Kowloon. And so in the meantime, let's all be hopeful, be generous, as Yvonne said, and let's be safe. See you next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.